Story 1. I used to live on the edge of a quiet suburb in Vermont. Not the quaint, hallmark kind, more of a worn-down street with weather-beaten houses, cracked sidewalks, and chain-link fences choked by weeds. I just moved there after a divorce, trying to start fresh. It was me and my old Labrador, Daisy. We walked every night at the same time, just around dusk, when the sky turned copper and the neighborhood fell into a kind of uneasy hush. It started with the van, a rusted blue Dodge that began showing up parked down the block, facing the wrong direction. No plates, no stickers, and always in a different spot. The first time I noticed it, I figured it was just some broke neighbor trying to keep a clunker on the road. But then I realized I never saw anyone get in or out. Every night, no matter where it was parked, I'd glance inside on our walks. Curtains taped over the windows. Something about how they sagged, like there was always someone just behind them, watching. Daisy started pulling away whenever we passed. Her hackles would go up. She's an old girl, barely barks, but she'd whine and shuffle to the far side of the sidewalk when we got near that van. One night, I got gutsy and tapped on the window. No answer. I half expected some pissed-off drifter to yell at me, but the van just sat there like a dead thing. I leaned closer, trying to peek through a gap in the curtain. It smelled faintly of metal and rot. That night, I woke up at 3:14 a.m. to the sound of my doorbell. One single chime. I live alone. I didn't move. I lay there in bed, holding my breath so tightly my chest hurt. Daisy was growling from the foot of the bed, low, guttural, a sound I hadn't heard from her in years. I eventually crept to the front window. Nothing on the porch. Nothing on the street. But the van, it was parked directly in front of my house now. I called the police. When the officer arrived, he walked around it, shined his flashlight through the windows, knocked. Then he came back and told me it was empty. I asked about the smell. He just shook his head and said, "Probably garbage in the back. It's an old van." He left a warning notice on the windshield and drove off. The next day, it was gone. I figured it was over. But 2 nights later, Daisy started acting strange again. She wouldn't go past the alley between my house and the neighbors. Her eyes fixed on the dark. Her ears flat. I stood there with her, peering down that alley. Nothing. Until I saw something move. Not a person. Not exactly. It was like the air warped for a second, like heat shimmer, but there was no warmth, just cold. And I swear, I heard whispering, so faint, I thought it might be in my head. I pulled Daisy and rushed inside. After that, it wasn't just a van. I started hearing my name whispered through the vents at night. My door would be unlocked in the morning, though I always latched it. Lights flickering. My phone battery draining overnight, even on airplane mode. Daisy began sleeping under my bed instead of beside it. One night, I found muddy footprints leading from the back door to the hallway mirror. Just one set, barefoot. I stood there, staring at them, trying to remember if maybe I'd walked outside in my sleep. I hadn't. I checked the locks again, every window. Nothing was broken, nothing forced. But that night, the whispering turned into breathing. Close. Right behind me. I snapped. I packed a bag, loaded Daisy in the car, and drove 4 hours to my sister's. I stayed there for a month. Didn't tell her why. Just said I needed to get away. When I finally went back to the house, everything was normal. Too normal. No van, no footprints, no noise. But something was off in a way I couldn't explain. Like the air inside wasn't mine anymore. I lasted 2 more days, then sold the place for a loss and moved to a condo with security cameras and underground parking. I still think about that van and the whispering and what might have happened if I hadn't left when I did. Sometimes, when I'm falling asleep, I hear a single chime, just one, and Daisy growls in her sleep. Story 2. It was the summer after college, and I was crashing at my parents' house before starting my first job in the city. Their place is tucked in a quiet cul-de-sac in a suburban neighborhood where every house looks more or less the same. Lawns trimmed, driveways clean, shutters all painted some shade of blue or beige. But despite the pristine look, there's something about cul-de-sacs that's always unsettled me. That weird silence at night. No through traffic. You get the feeling you're sealed in. Anyway, I had trouble sleeping that summer. Maybe it was the job anxiety, maybe the oppressive heat, but I'd stay up late, scrolling through my phone or pacing the upstairs hallway. That's when I started noticing the light. Across the street, 2 houses down, there was a bedroom window that would flick on around 2:30 a.m. every night. Just one light, and it stayed on for exactly 3 minutes before going dark again. At first, I figured someone had insomnia like me. But when it happened night after night to the second, it felt deliberate, too precise to be normal. One night, I decided to watch. I turned off all my lights, sat on the floor by my bedroom window, then waited. At exactly 2:31, the light turned on. I could see a silhouette, just the edge of someone's head and shoulder, standing motionless near the window. They didn't move, didn't look out, just stood there like a statue. Only shadows melting into darkness for exactly 3 minutes. Then the light went off, black again. This kept happening every night. I told my mom about it, kind of joking around, and she gave me a strange look. "That house," she said, "no one lives there right now. The Parkers moved out last fall. It's been empty." I thought maybe she was mistaken, but I checked the real estate listing. She was right. The house was unoccupied, still on the market. And next night, I set an alarm. I wanted to film it. At 2:31, the light went on. I hit record. But this time, the silhouette moved, just a little. The head turned slightly, as if listening. I felt a chill crawl up my back. My phone screen went black mid-recording. Not frozen, dead. Battery drained completely, though it had been at 70%. When I plugged it in and reviewed the footage the next morning, the file was corrupted. Nothing but static. I convinced myself I was being paranoid. Probably just a caretaker checking in. Maybe a light on a timer. Rational things. Until the knocking started. It was faint at first. Not at the front door. At my bedroom window. The second-story window. I thought maybe it was a bird. Or maybe I imagined it. But then I saw it. A smudge on the glass. Like a handprint. Not a full one. Just the tips of fingers, streaked downward. I didn't sleep at all that night. I kept the blinds drawn, locked the window tight. But the next morning, there were more prints. Higher, almost at the top pane. My room's 15 feet off the ground. There's no ledge, no tree close enough. I went outside with a flashlight, searching the siding, the ground. Nothing. Not even footprints. The light in the empty house kept going on at 2:31 a.m. every night. I stopped watching it. I didn't want to see that silhouette again, but it got worse. I started hearing faint scratching, not inside my room, but from inside the walls, like something dragging along the wooden beams. My dad said it was probably mice, but I knew better. The last night before I moved out, I woke to a cold breeze. The window was wide open. I hadn't opened it. I never opened it. I stared at it for what felt like forever, heart thudding. Then I noticed something tucked between the window and the sill. A folded piece of paper. No writing, no message, just a dark red smear across the center, like someone had dragged their finger across it, or a tongue. I don't know. I burned it in the sink. I moved out 2 days later. I don't visit often, but when I do, I avoid looking out my old bedroom window. And I don't ask if that house across the street ever sold. Because sometimes, when I'm back in town and passing through that cul-de-sac, I'll glance up at the second-story window, and the light will turn on, just for 3 minutes. Story 3. Back in 2017, I moved into a small, 2-bedroom rental on a dead-end street in eastern Oregon. Cheap rent, quiet neighbors, lots of trees. Seemed perfect. I'd just gotten out of a bad roommate situation, so the idea of living alone felt like a relief. I had my dog, Charlie, for company, and that was enough. There were only 5 other houses on the street, and most of them looked lived in but not cared for. Peeling paint, overgrown lawns, except for the place directly across from mine. That house was pristine. White siding, perfectly trimmed hedges, a green porch swing that swayed slightly, even when there was no wind. But I never saw anyone come or go. On my 3rd day there, I asked the mailman about it. He paused for a second before answering. Old guy used to live there, he said. Bit of a shut-in. Place has been empty for years, though. That confused me. Someone had to be maintaining the yard. The grass was always perfectly cut. Every morning at 6 a.m., the porch light turned off. At dusk, it turned back on. The house looked too alive to be abandoned. About a week in, I was out walking Charlie when I saw movement in the upstairs window of the house. Just a glimpse, like a curtain shifting. I stopped and watched, waiting to see if someone would appear. Nothing. Charlie whined and pulled at the leash. He never liked that side of the street. Later that night, I was brushing my teeth when I noticed something odd. My bathroom window looks out at that house, and in the dim light, I could see the porch swing was still moving. Not swaying gently, but swinging in long, deliberate arcs. Back and forth. No wind. I turned off the lights and just stared. There was no one sitting on it. Just the swing, moving like someone had just gotten up. I tried not to think much of it. Maybe it was my imagination. But things kept piling up. 2 weeks later, I came home from the grocery store and found muddy footprints on my front steps. Barefoot, small, leading right up to the door, then vanishing. Charlie barked and wouldn't go near them. I checked the whole house. Nothing was taken, nothing broken. Then the knocking started. 3 soft knocks on the front door, always just after 3 a.m., never more than once a night. The first time, I froze in bed and waited. The second time, I crept to the peephole and saw no one, not even footprints. The third time, I called the police. They came out, did a patrol, checked around, found nothing. Said it was probably some teenager messing around, or maybe a raccoon. But I knew better. I started keeping a knife under my pillow, just in case. And then one night, I looked out my bedroom window and saw someone standing in the yard across the street. Not moving, just standing near the porch swing, facing my house. I watched them for almost 10 minutes. They never turned, never swayed, just stood there like they were waiting for something. Eventually, I went downstairs, turned on all the lights, and stayed up till dawn. That morning, I went to check if they left any tracks, but the yard across the street was untouched. No footprints, no indentation where someone had stood. Just a perfectly still porch swing, gently creaking back and forth. I started looking into the house's history. The old man who lived there, his name was Raymond Keller, died in 2004. No family. Body wasn't found for almost a month. Neighbors said he never left the house. Some of them believed he never left. Period. After that, I began to feel watched. Not just from across the street, from inside my own house. I'd hear floorboards creaking in the hallway when I was in bed. Catch a whiff of something old and sour in rooms I hadn't entered all day. One night, I woke up and saw the bathroom light on. I always turned it off. I got up to shut it and found the mirror fogged over, like someone had just taken a shower. In the middle of the mirror, A small handprint. Low. Like from a child. I don't have kids. That was it for me. I broke my lease and moved out 2 weeks later. The day I was loading the last box into my car, I glanced across the street one final time. The porch swing was still, but in the upstairs window, I saw a face watching me. Expressionless. Pale. I blinked, and it was gone. Story 4. In 2019, I was renting a basement apartment in a sleepy neighborhood just outside of Spokane. It was the kind of place people move to after retirement. Quiet, trimmed hedges, the occasional ceramic goose on a front lawn. My landlord lived upstairs. Nice enough guy, older, kept to himself. We had separate entrances, and I liked the privacy. But right next door to us was this strange, narrow 2-story house, barely wide enough for 2 windows across. Gray siding, always a little weather-worn, always too dark. I never once saw anyone go in or out of it. That alone wasn't weird. What was weird was the light in the upstairs window. It would flicker on in the early morning hours, never the same time. Sometimes 3:47 a.m., sometimes 1:26 a.m., sometimes not at all. And when it was on, I could see someone moving behind the curtain. I told myself someone had to live there, maybe a nurse with weird shifts. But there was no trash can out front, no mail in the box, no car in the driveway. Just a lawn nobody mowed and a cracked bird bath that never had any birds. One night, I came home late from work and noticed something new. The curtain in that upstairs window was gone. The light was still on, dim and yellow like an old lamp. But now I could see inside. The room was completely empty. Except for a chair. Just one wooden chair in the middle of the room, facing the window, and someone sitting in it. They didn't move. They didn't turn their head. Just sat there, perfectly still, looking out across the yard and directly at my window. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I looked out, they were still there, still sitting, still staring. In the morning, the light was off, the chair was gone, curtain back in place. A few days later, I ran into my landlord in the driveway. I asked him, casually, if anyone lived in the house next door. He looked over his shoulder, then said, "No, not for years. Family left after their kid went missing. Place has been empty ever since." I asked what happened to the kid. They say he climbed out of bed one night and just walked into the woods, he said. Never found a body. That night, I was brushing my teeth when I heard it. 3 slow knocks on the wall, not the door. The wall. The one that faced the house next door. I stood there, toothbrush in my mouth, waiting to hear it again. Nothing. But when I came back into my bedroom, there was a wet footprint on the carpet. Just one. Bare. Small. I hadn't showered. I hadn't been outside. The footprint was gone the next morning. The wall felt colder than usual, but few nights later, I woke up to the feeling that someone was in the room with me. I turned on the light. Nothing. But the air felt thick, like it was hard to breathe. I could smell something too. Damp earth, moss, like the inside of a forest just after it rains. Then I noticed the closet door was open, just an inch. I never leave it open. I didn't go check it. I just lay there until the sun came up. The next day, I asked around the neighborhood, trying to be subtle. One older woman, Mrs. Holland, was walking her terrier and stopped to chat. When I mentioned the house next door, her whole face tightened. "You live beside that place?" she said. "My husband swears he saw someone watching him from the upstairs window last year. Just a shape." He called the police. They found nothing. Then she leaned closer and added, "You know what's odd? That boy who went missing? His bedroom was the one with the window that faces yours." That night, I moved my bed to the opposite wall and shut all the blinds. Around 2:13 a.m., I woke up to the sound of a faint voice. It was coming from the vent near the floor. A child's voice, whispering, "Are you going to let me in now?" I didn't answer. I couldn't move. The whisper came again, louder this time. "Please, I don't want to be alone anymore." I packed up the next morning, left the lease unpaid, changed my number. I never looked back. But sometimes, even now, I wake up with dirt under my nails and the faint smell of wet leaves clinging to my pillow. Story 5. It was a few years ago when I moved into a townhouse on the far edge of a newly built development. I liked that it backed up to a wooded ravine. No neighbors behind me, just tall trees and quiet. I was going through a rough patch mentally and needed solitude. My therapist suggested journaling, walking, disconnecting from screens. I took it seriously. I began taking daily walks around dusk with my dog, Mira. The neighborhood wasn't fully occupied yet, so some units were still vacant. Half-finished driveways, paper taped to windows, construction debris scattered around. It gave the area an unfinished feel, like a place waiting to wake up. It started subtly. At first, I thought I was just being jumpy. A motion light would flick on when I passed an empty unit. A front door, fully closed when I walked by, would be ajar when I came back around. One time, Mira stopped walking completely and growled low, her body tense. She stared at the upstairs window of a house still under construction. I saw nothing. No light, no movement. But then I noticed the curtain. One of the upstairs windows in that unit, where no one had moved in yet, suddenly had a curtain. Just one. Old, floral, faded red. It hadn't been there the day before. These were cookie-cutter homes, and none of the other units had curtains yet. The interior lights were always bare bulbs, if anything at all. I figured someone had moved in quietly, maybe a night worker. But no car ever appeared in the driveway. No deliveries, no trash cans, no signs of life. Still, the curtain stayed. One night, I took Mira out a little later than usual. It was darker than I liked, and the air felt heavy, almost electrical. As we passed the red curtain house, Mira refused to go near it. She sat down and wouldn't budge. I tugged gently on the leash, and she whimpered, then looked up at the window. The curtain moved. Not like a breeze. It was yanked to the side. I looked up, heart thudding, and saw a shape. Tall, impossibly thin. Just a silhouette. It didn't move, but I could feel it looking down at us. I turned around and walked home fast. Mira practically dragging behind me. That night, I dreamt I was in that house, walking up the stairs. The walls were wrong, too narrow, the steps too steep. The window with the red curtain was open, and wind howled through the room. Something was in the corner, watching, waiting. I woke up drenched in sweat, Mira pawing at my chest like she was trying to wake me. For the next few nights, I avoided walking past that unit. I stuck to the other end of the development, took shortcuts through the unfinished park trail. But the feeling didn't go away. I started hearing things at night. Scratching, like fingernails on drywall, always from the same wall that faced that house. I tried to write it off as raccoons or construction settling, but Mira would sit by the wall for hours, just staring, tail curled under her. Then came the photographs. One morning, I found a stack of printed Polaroids on my doorstep. No envelope, no note, just photos, dozens of them, all taken from what looked like inside the red curtain house. Some were angled from behind the curtain, pointed at my house. Some were taken through the slats in my blinds. One of them was of me sleeping. Another showed Mira sitting by the wall, her eyes glowing faintly in the flash. I went to the property manager. They told me the red curtain unit hadn't sold yet, still vacant, still under contract. They agreed to do a walkthrough. I went with them. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the air was thick, musty, like a house shut up for decades. No furniture, no light bulbs, just construction dust and silence. And in the one upstairs bedroom, no curtain, no rod, no sign there had ever been one. But in the corner of the room was a pile of Polaroid wrappers and a long, thin scratch carved into the drywall, like someone had dragged a single nail all the way down. We moved out a week later, found a place in the city with people on all sides. I haven't seen any photos since, but Mira still won't go near a red curtain, even if it's just on TV. Story 6. This happened 2 years ago, just after I moved into a duplex on the edge of a quiet neighborhood in New Mexico. The other unit was empty at the time, still being listed, and I liked the solitude. No loud neighbors, no traffic. I worked from home, so it suited me fine. At first, everything felt peaceful. I liked hearing the wind rattle the mesquite trees and watching the occasional coyote slink down the drainage ditch behind the house. But within a few weeks, I started noticing noises through the wall, light footsteps, creaks in the floorboards, sometimes a cough, dry, low, almost trying not to be heard. At night, I'd hear pacing, always in the same rhythm, slow, methodical, back and forth. It was the kind of sound that doesn't just wake you up, it keeps you still. I assumed maybe someone had rented the other unit quietly. Or maybe realtors were showing it at odd hours. But there was never a car in the driveway. No lights on. No mail. Just noise. One night, around 2 a.m., I heard a knock. Not on the front door, on the shared wall between our living rooms. Just one deliberate knock. Sharp, like knuckle on drywall. I sat up in bed, frozen, waited. Then another knock, closer to the floor this time, like someone crouching. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I told myself it was maybe an animal in the crawl space or plumbing. In the morning, I called the property manager. They told me flat out, no one's living there. We haven't shown it in a month. I hung up, unsettled. Later that day, I went outside and peeked through the neighbors' windows. Empty. Completely. No furniture. No boxes. Just bare walls and a dusty floor. I knocked lightly on the glass. Nothing moved inside. But that night, the footsteps returned. Same pace. Same rhythm. And then the whispering started. Soft and continuous. Just the sound of someone murmuring to themselves, maybe right up against the wall. I couldn't make out the words, just a low, continuous murmur, like someone repeating a phrase over and over. I tried recording the sounds with my phone. Every time I played the files back, there was nothing. Total silence. No knocks. No whispers. Just dead air. It made me feel like I was losing it, like maybe I was imagining everything. One night, fed up and scared, I stood by the wall and knocked back. 3 short taps with my knuckles. The noise stopped immediately. Not just paused, stopped. Everything fell silent. Then ever so faintly, a voice whispered, finally. Not muffled. Clear. Right up against the wall. That was it for me. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I moved out, packed my car that same week and left. I didn't even cancel the lease. I left half my stuff behind. I figured whatever I lost wasn't worth staying one more night. Months later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Area code was local. I let it go to voicemail. The message was short, less than 10 seconds, but I've never forgotten it. It was a man's voice, calm, too calm, like someone smiling through their teeth. I'm in now. Thanks for the invitation. That's all he said. I replayed it a dozen times. Same tone, same words, no background noise. I tried calling the number back, but it had been disconnected. I changed my number after that. Didn't want to know if he or it would try again. A few times I almost convinced myself it was a prank or some weird coincidence. But then I'd think about the voice through the wall, the knock, the pacing, the way it all stopped the moment I acknowledged it. And I knew whatever was on the other side of that wall hadn't just been waiting. It had been listening, And I had answered. I still check real estate sites sometimes, just out of curiosity. The duplex is still listed. Still vacant. Same photos from years ago. One shows the empty living room with the shared wall and frame. Every time I see it, I remember that knock. Short, sharp, deliberate. A request, an invitation. I think about how quiet the place was at first. How peaceful. How I thought I'd found the perfect spot to be alone. But some places don't want you to be alone. Some places wait, and when you acknowledge them, they move in. I've told only a handful of people about what happened. Most smile politely, or give me that look, the one that says maybe you're just tired, maybe you were stressed. But I know what I heard. I know what I felt. If you ever come across a duplex listing in New Mexico with one side perpetually empty, do yourself a favor. Don't knock. Don't listen. And whatever you do, don't answer back.